Yesterday, we finally saw a rework to the Guardian Druid after months of silence from Blizzard. In this video, I want to talk through the changes, how they affect the class, and more importantly, if these changes are actually good or not. I mostly will be referring to Mythic Plus, but I will mention some rating points. I do want to mention that these class changes are actually only currently in place on beta, and really only affect Dragonflight. With that being said, it is, after all, still beta, and similar to these changes, there are always the possibility of future changes in the tree and tuning to the class. Also, without being able to test Mythic Plus, my thoughts on these changes are mostly speculative, and I'm going to be doing more testing this weekend once Mythic Plus is available. But with that out of the way, let's take a look. In the blue post from yesterday, we can see that Blizzard made more than a handful of changes to the Guardian Druid spec. First and foremost, they added additional connection nodes, and they shuffled up the tree by moving the arcane Moonfire based talents like Galactic Guardian and Twin Moonfire and Scintillating Moonlight past the 20-point gate into the tier 3 row. Obviously, with these talents moving down, some points naturally had to move up. We will now find Survival of the Fittest, Soul of the Forest, and the Choice node after the Wildfire, and Guardian of a Loon just after the 8-point gate in the tier 2. Alongside this, that Choice node was actually buffed, so after the Wildfire, it now does 50% more healing than it did before, and Guardian of a Loon now provides 3 seconds of additional Iron Fur, up from 2. Lastly, they split Dream of Cenarius and Ursoc's Fury on the left-hand side in the tier 3 row. Whether these changes are impactful or good, we're going to address in a second. But it's also important to talk about some of these buffs and nerfs that we saw accompanying this talent tree shift. Guardian Druids with this change saw a massive 40% buff to Maul and a 15% buff to Mangle, while also seeing a nerf to Twin Moonfire. From a glance, you would think that these changes are good. Maul and Mangle buffs sound nice, and more connecting nodes should offer more flexibility, and buffed defensive talents should, allow for more meaningful choice, right? Right? Like I said before, what I'm going to talk about here is partly speculation and partly training dummy testing. Without being able to step into Mythic Plus until this weekend, it's hard to get a full grasp on these changes. There are also some bugs as well with certain talent interactions, for example, Incarnation not reducing the cost of Maul while you're talented into Unchecked Aggression, or for some reason now Tooth and Claw being a 2-point node. I just want to say that the Maul and Mangle buffs are great. End of story. Bears have always been on the lower end of pure single target damage, specifically in Mythic Plus. While the Guardian Druid is actively tanking, you aren't able to safely shift into other forms to deal damage. In Raid though, this doesn't really matter as much since there are windows where you might not be actively tanking, but while you're in bear form, it's just nice to have more damage. These buffs provided the option to be able to deal actually fairly sizable single target damage on Maul hits. If you play into talents like Vulnerable Flesh, Vicious Cycle, and Tooth and Claw, Maul and Mangle actually become some of your hardest hitting abilities while also providing a damage reduction and healing with talents like Tooth and Claw alongside Soul of the Forest and the new Season 1 tier set. Though it's probably unlikely you're going to see these talents getting used in Mythic Plus, specifically Tooth and Claw. Regarding the nerf to Twin Moonfire though, it's fine. Nerfs don't feel good ever, but with other talents like Fury of Nature, Loon's Favorite, and Galactic Guardian, Twin Moonfire provides a ton of benefit for both damage and healing. Personally though, this talent still feels odd since if you're talented into this option, it still makes Moonfire your filler spell in single target and 2-target cleave since it will hit roughly 5 to 10% harder than Swipe will. I personally think it's possible to run Galactic Guardian build still in Mythic Plus, but because of all these changes and talents that were shifted around, we have to go way deeper into the tree, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. My first impression, as it seems most players' first impressions were, these changes seem like ass and somehow worse. After spending a few hours on beta though with it, I don't think that's the case, and I think this tree is in a much better state compared to the previous trees. I'm not saying that this tree is fixed, actually far from it. There's still very limited mobility and the pathing is still really linear with not a lot of competitive options, but it is in a better state than it was 3 days ago. Let's talk about the issue with the tree, and then I'll talk about why I actually really like the layout even more. Alright, so let's first quickly talk about the 2-point nodes in the linear tree. What makes a talent tree like this work is the flexibility in picking talents based off of different factors, like type of content, group composition, and just general preference. A good tree should allow for freedom of expression while also still appearing competitive. Even though this tree had more connecting nodes added to it, from connecting improved survival instincts to Ursoc's endurance to layered main, this really doesn't address the problem of lateral movement that the tree has been struggling with since its original inception. If you want to access either the far left or right sides of the tree, you must play a very specific set of talents, even if you don't want those talents, whether it's, undertuned, or if you as a player just don't want those talents. In this case, let's just say you wanted to play with the recently buffed After the Wildfire talent choice. There's only one path to get there. Improved Mangle, Gory Fur, and then 2 points of Survival of the Fittest. This by itself can be shrugged off. Plenty of classes must take a few talents with little workaround. The difference is that most classes can actually reach multiple capstones regardless of which path that they take. Guardian Druid not only will have to play through forced 2-point nodes to access their tier 2 of the tree, but they also must play into 2-point nodes to access their last tier of the tree without being able to really jump around. This is what makes the far right side of the tree much less appealing, knowing that if you want certain talents, you'll never gain access to Incarnation without having to go back up and over. At a bare minimum, they should at least add connecting nodes from the Berserk talents in the tier 2 to the center capstone area. You can find this in all of their tank spec trees, the ability to access the middle from the outside. To top it all off, even if you don't want to play a Moonfire based spec, Fury of Nature is a must take 2-point node to access Circle of Life and Death along with Incarnation. Historically, Guardian Druid's best defensive and offensive CD, which focuses on thrash and physical damage. So being forced to take an Arcane Amplifier feels just odd at best. Access to Blood and Frenzy is also impossible without having to take 2 points into Scintillating Moonlight, which, once again, if you aren't playing Galactic Guardian, feels absolutely useless outside of boss encounters in Mythic Plus. Unless Blizzard adds more flexible routing options and workarounds for this tree layout, this spec will always feel pretty ass to play if you're trying to access things like Blood Frenzy and Incarnation without Galactic Guardian. While this can be considered a rework, there's still a long way to go with this talent tree. Alright, I'm not really here though to shit on this tree. I really don't like the doom and gloom topics, and I've already done enough of that in past videos. I actually wanted to talk about why this change is still a net positive and why I think this puts Guardian Druid in a much better spot. Though, let me be clear, it's far from perfect. First, Maul and Mangle means that we have more single target damage, and now for raids you can justify Vicious Cycle's vulnerable Flesh and Tooth and Claw, which has revitalized those talents. Mangle also now just slaps with the buff and the tier set and of course Soul of the Forest, and there's a lot more competitive defensive and utility choices like Survival of the Fittest and After the Wildfire, which can actually provide a pretty solid amount of healing to your group as long as it's effective. In Mythic Plus, since Legion, Bear has always struggled in higher keys due to the watered down and limited defensive kits, accompanied with low single target damage. The previous tree limited access to strong active and or passive defensives like Survival Instincts, Ursoc's Fury, and Rage of the Sleeper, all while maintaining adequate damage with Galactic Guardian. While most tanks actually had more options, Bear felt handicapped in a lot of different scenarios. But because we're now seeing an offensive kit, Rage Generation, and defensives all being loaded into the lower right side of the tree, it means that we don't really have to pick between offense or defense. This rework actually freed up about 3 points, which can now be placed elsewhere. I have 2 speculated builds, one that focuses on Moonfire and Galactic Guardian, and one that leans back into Ursoc's Fury. Without Mythic Plus testing, it's hard to know which one will come out on top, but Ursoc's Fury has a lot of potential now. Both builds have a similar starting structure that looks like this. We're going to go Maul, Gore, Survival, Brambles, Innate Resolve, Adapt, Berserk, Improved Mangle. We're also going to grab Improved Survival Instincts because we're going to need that point here to access Tier 3 later on. Also, having 2 charges of Survival Instincts in Mythic Plus is just a massive boon. On the left side of the tree, we're going to be grabbing Flesh and Claws, Earth Warden, and Unchecked Aggression. In lower keys, Earth Warden is pretty garbage since it normally scales at a 1-to-1 ratio with the key level, meaning that it'll do much less healing in a plus 10 than it will in a plus 25 since it's a percentage based on auto attack intake while active. You can work around this by playing Vicious Cycles in lower keys if you still want Unchecked Aggression, though it's not needed and you can put these points elsewhere. After this, we're going to shoot straight through Layered Mane and Reinforced Fur while picking up Soul of the Forest. This will give us more single target damage for those pesky boss fights, and we'll have a nice synergy with our tier set and consistent Incarnation cooldown reduction. Now the rest of our points are going right into Fury of Nature and Persistence. Now that we have tier 3 unlocked, we can pick up all of our Moonfire talents, Blood Frenzy, Rage of the Sleeper, and of course Incarnation. Incarnation, by the way, with the Ursoc's Guidance capstone can put Incarnation anywhere between a 90-second cooldown to a 2-minute cooldown, so really good uptime. Essentially, this tree gives us access to double Survival Instincts, Rage of the Sleeper on a 1.5-minute cooldown, and a 1.5-minute cooldown on Incarnation as well. It also gives us insanely high Rage regeneration because of Blood Frenzy, and sustained healing through Moonfire outside of our cooldowns. Also, as a bonus, you can pick up Nature's Vigil in the class tree, but don't get me started about that design. Now, there are players out there that don't like Galactic Guardian, so luckily you can actually drop the Moonfire talents like Twin, Galactic, and Elune to pick up Ursoc's Fury, And with the recent health buffs, Frenzied Regen indirectly got buffed as well, so Ursoc's build could prove to be quite useful, but we're going to have to see when Blizzard nerfs the percent-based healing. If you don't want Rage of the Sleeper, you can also have access to the Rend and Tear / Untamed Savagery node, which is fine as well. With how much Rage we're going to be able to generate in Mythic Plus, Bear got actually a pretty massive glow up with this new build. My biggest positive gripe is that after the Wildfire seems like it has crazy healing potential, especially in melee cleaves with Blood Frenzy and Soul of the Forest, but I doubt it'll be that strong, but regardless, I'm eager to test it. The main issue with that talent choice is that it's locked behind a few odd talents that are quite costly. Overall, bears should be happier. I mean, I'm personally happier with this tree, and I can live with this until 10.1 or patch 11.5, whenever they finally give attention to the second class tank. Anyways, that's my time. It's been a roller coaster of emotions over the last few hours, honestly. Once again, this is mostly speculation and relatively subjective. Once Mythic Plus becomes active in a few days, I will be testing a fair bit on the bear and giving more precise feedback about the playstyle and just general performance. If you want to hear my impressions on VDH or Protection Paladin, go check out those videos linked below. Huge shout out to all my patrons who give their actual dollars and dimes to support my caffeine addiction. Without you guys, there'd be a lot less of, well, whatever this is. Hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.